My name is Grace Harmon. I'm 36 years old. I'm an EMT. And 5 weeks ago, a dying man grabbed my work ID off my chest, read my last name out loud, and broke down sobbing like a child. He pulled me close with what little strength he had left and whispered 7 words that shattered everything I thought I knew about myself, my stepmother, my biological father, and the first 34 years of my life. He said, "Your mother lied. She told me you died in the fire." I grew up believing my real dad was a violent drifter who walked out on my stepmother and me when I was barely 2 years old. That was the story. Sandra's story. The only story I ever had. I carried that wound everywhere, into community college, into EMT school, into every single 12-hour shift I've ever worked in the back of an ambulance, holding strangers' hands on the worst days of their lives. I built everything, my whole sense of who I was, every wall I ever put up, every reason I never let anyone get too close, on the belief that I knew what being left behind looked like. I was wrong about every single thing. Before I take you back to that night, I need you to do something for me right now. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is. I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and stay with me because this story goes places I still can't fully believe happened to me. Now, let me take you back to a Wednesday evening in late November. The night shift. The night I met the man in Bay 4. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Tucson, Arizona. 2nd floor. Kind of place where the air conditioning hums like it's in pain from June through October. I work for Pima County Emergency Medical Services, 2 days on, 2 days off, rotating nights. The rest of the time I eat cereal standing at the counter, watch too many true crime shows, and avoid phone calls from my stepmother, Sandra. I chose this life, every inch of it. When I was 8 years old, I asked my stepmother where my real daddy was. Sandra was ironing clothes in the living room. I remember because the iron kept hissing steam every few seconds like it was cutting her off. She didn't look up at me for a long, long moment. When she finally did, her eyes were pink around the edges. "He was a bad man, Grace," she said. "He hurt people. He ran when things got hard. You are so much better off without him in your life, baby girl." I climbed up on the arm of the sofa and hugged her from behind. She squeezed my hand. I told her I wasn't going anywhere. Ever. I kept that promise for 28 years. I became an EMT because of that moment. 'Cause I wanted to be the person who shows up. When everyone else is panicking and falling apart, I wanted to be the calm one who walks through the door and says, "I got you. I'm not leaving. You are not alone in this." Every patient I've ever loaded into that rig, every hand I've grabbed when someone was scared and didn't know if they were going to make it, all of it connected back to that living room, that hissing iron, Sandra's pink eyes. I didn't know yet that every single word she'd said to me that day was a carefully planned lie. It was a Wednesday evening. My shift started at 6 p.m. like it always does. We got a call at 8:47 p.m., chest pains, male patient, age 57, at a long-term care facility on the east side of Tucson. My partner that night was Marcus Webb, a big quiet guy from Savannah, Georgia, 8 years on the job, cool as a cucumber no matter what. We'd worked together for 3 years. He knew when I needed to talk and when I needed quiet, and he almost always got it right. We rolled in, grabbed our gear, and went inside. Patient was in room 7. His name on the sheet said Daniel Harmon, 57, under care for advanced liver disease and heart problems. He'd been moved from a care center in El Paso, Texas, 3 weeks earlier. A close family friend had set up the move so he could spend his last few weeks somewhere with a warmer climate. I didn't think twice about the last name. Harmon is not exactly rare. He was propped up in the bed, thin the way people get when the body is burning through its very last bit of fuel just to keep going. Yellow skin from the liver. Hollow face. Arms bruised from 4 lines. But his eyes were sharp and wide open and locked on me from the second I walked through the door. "Good evening, Mr. Harmon," I said. "I'm Grace, one of your paramedics tonight. We're going to check you out and make sure you're doing okay. Can you tell me what's going on?" He nodded. Let Marcus take his blood pressure. But the whole time he kept watching me. I leaned across him to check the pulse reader on his finger, and my work ID, the laminated badge I clipped to my shirt pocket, swung forward on its reel. His hand came up fast. Way faster than a man that's sick had any right to move. He grabbed my badge and held on. I looked down. He was staring at it. His lips were moving but no sound was coming out. Then I watched his eyes fill with tears, and this man, this complete stranger, this dying man in a care facility bed, just started to cry. Harmon, he whispered. Your name is Harmon. I gently uncurled his fingers from the badge. Sir, you're okay. You're safe. Can you tell me where the pain is? He couldn't stop staring at my face. He was looking at it the way you look at something you've been searching for and almost can't believe you're finally seeing. How old are you? His voice was barely there, thin and rough like old rope left out in the weather too long. 36. He closed his eyes so tight his whole face tensed up. His jaw worked. A single tear ran down his cheek and disappeared into the collar of his hospital gown. I've been looking for you for 34 years. Marcus looked up from his clipboard. He caught my eye across the bed. I gave him the smallest shake of my head, I've got this, and he stepped quietly out into the hallway to give us room. Sir, I think maybe the medication. Your mother. He opened his eyes. They were hazel. Dark hazel, almost brown and perfectly clear. Sandra Mitchell. She told me you were dead. She said there was a house fire. She said you didn't make it out. Everything in me went cold. Sandra Mitchell. That was my stepmother's name before she married Raymond Pettis. The name I'd seen exactly once, printed on a paper I'd stumbled across in a shoebox at the back of Sandra's closet when I was 12, snooping around for Christmas presents. The name she never once used or mentioned out loud. This dying stranger had just said it like he'd been holding it in his mouth for decades, just waiting for the right moment to let it go. That's not, my throat closed up. Sir, my father was a violent man. He left when I was 2 years old. Daniel Harmon looked at me with the clearest eyes I had ever seen on a patient. No medicine fog. No mix-up. Nothing but raw, aching recognition. I have never raised a hand to a single person in my entire life, he said quietly. And I have spent every dollar I ever made trying to find you. He held out his hand. I don't know why I didn't pull back. I just didn't. I'm your father, Grace. I never stopped looking. Not for one single day. My training said, this is a confused patient, handle it with care. My gut, that deep, quiet thing that good paramedics learn to trust, said something completely different. If you've ever had a moment where the floor just dropped out from under your whole life, type floors me in the comments right now. 'Cause that is exactly what was happening in room 7 of that care facility. Keep watching because what I found in the next 60 seconds changed everything. The room felt like it had gotten smaller. The blood pressure monitor beeped steady. The ceiling fan turned slow above us. I could hear myself breathing too fast and too shallow. Daniel raised one shaking hand and pointed toward the small closet in the corner. A beat-up gray duffel bag sat on the floor, the only thing he'd brought with him. There's a thick envelope in the outside pocket, he said. Open it. My hands moved before my brain told them to. I unzipped the bag and pulled out a fat envelope, soft at the edges from being opened and closed so many times the paper had gone limp. I undid the clasp. The first thing inside was a birth certificate. State of Texas. El Paso General Hospital. Father, Daniel Roy Harmon. Mother, Sandra Lynn Mitchell. Child, Grace Lynn Harmon. Date of birth, June 3, 1989. My birthday. My actual birthday. Below it, a photograph. A baby in a white onesie with little yellow ducks sitting on a blue blanket. I knew that face the second I saw it. I had seen it once before, in the one baby photo Sandra kept in a frame on her dresser. The one she said was all she had left after the fire took everything. I turned the page. Private detective receipts. Stacks of them. Different agencies, different states, dated from 1992 all the way to 2023. Different amounts, all adding up to what must have been a huge sum over the years. Every single one searching for the same person. Grace Lynn Harmon, female, born June 1989. Then the letters. Handwritten on notebook paper, on the backs of old receipts, on whatever he could find. Every single one started the exact same way. Dear Grace. I picked up the first one. June 1992. Happy 3rd birthday, baby girl. Daddy doesn't know where you are right now, but I'm going to find you. I built you a swing set last weekend. It's in the backyard waiting for you. My hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. I was standing in an emergency care room on a Wednesday night in November, holding proof that my whole life had been built on a made-up story. The man who had supposedly walked away from me had spent 34 years writing birthday letters to a daughter he was told had died in a fire. I barely made it to the hallway before my knees gave out. I sat down on the floor, back against the wall, the envelope in my lap. The fluorescent light above me buzzed. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor went off and I heard a nurse's sneakers squeak across the floor toward it. I called my best friend, Chelsea. It was almost 10 at night. She picked up on the second ring. Grace? What happened? You okay? I think the patient I just responded to is my biological father. Dead silence. And I think my stepmother lied to both of us for 34 years. More silence. Then, quietly, start from the beginning. I'm not moving an inch. I told her everything. The badge. Sandra's old last name. The birth certificate. The letters. The detective receipts. All of it in one long, tangled rush, sitting on a linoleum floor with my back against a cinder block wall at 10 o'clock at night. Chelsea didn't say a word until I stopped. When I finally stopped talking, she let out a long, slow breath. Can you prove any of this on your own? The birth certificate matches. The name matches. The dates all line up. Then you need to find out the truth, Grace. Not just for him. For you. I looked down the hallway. Through the cracked door of room 7, I could see the dark shape of Daniel still in the bed. This man had 6 to 8 weeks left. Maybe less. If I said nothing, he would die believing his daughter had burned up in a motel fire before she turned 3. If I went after Sandra, I would blow apart 34 years of the only story I'd ever known. But there was more in that envelope. Something I didn't find until the next morning. I went back to the facility at 7:15 a.m. on Thursday, off the clock, in jeans and a sweatshirt. Daniel was awake and sharper than the night before. I pulled the chair right up to his bed. I need you to tell me everything, I said. From the very beginning. He took a breath that visibly cost him something. 1991, you were 2 years old. I came home from a run. I drove long-haul trucks back then, El Paso to Albuquerque and back, 3 days out, 4 days home. I pulled into the driveway and Sandra's car was gone. I went inside. Your room was empty. Your clothes, your stuffed animals, the little yellow blanket you had to have to fall asleep, all of it gone. She had been planning this for a while. This wasn't some fight that got out of hand. She packed you up like she was moving to a different country. He paused. Swallowed. Every sentence took something out of him. 3 weeks later, a woman named Carol, Sandra's cousin, called me. Said Sandra had asked her to pass along a message. She said that Sandra and you had been in a fire at a roadside motel in New Mexico while Sandra was driving to her sister's house. She said a little girl had died in that fire. She said it was you. Did you believe her? Not fully. Not ever. But I was 22 years old, Grace. No money, no lawyer, no clue what to do next. Carol swore on her kids it was true. I called the police. Called hospitals all across New Mexico. There was no record of a little girl dying in any motel fire that matched. But without more to go on, he shook his head slowly. I was a nobody. She was the mother. And back in 1991, that meant everything when it came to the law. He told me about a man named Earl Goodwin, his closest friend since they were kids, now retired and living in El Paso, who had helped him file a missing persons report and pooled money with him for a private detective. But Sandra had already crossed state lines, cut her phone off, and started a whole new life in Tucson under a new last name, Pettis, after she married my stepfather Raymond. Back in 1991, if someone truly didn't want to be found, they mostly weren't. Earl has kept every single piece of paper, Daniel said. Every detective report, every dead end, every letter I wrote you but couldn't send because I had no idea where you were. He's had them in a fireproof box for 30 years. He handed me a phone number written in pencil on the back of a hospital menu. Call him. He's been waiting for this call almost as long as I have. I sat in the parking lot of the facility at 8 a.m., the November sun pale and thin through the windshield. I dialed. He answered on the second ring. Mr. Goodwin, my name is Grace Harmon. Daniel Harmon gave me your number. Total silence. 4 seconds. 5, 6, 7. Then a sound I was not ready for at all. A 69-year-old man breaking down into tears. Oh, Lord. His voice cracked all the way open. You're alive. You're really alive. He knew exactly who I was before I'd said another word. Earl confirmed everything. He still had all the files, detective reports, missing persons case, letters to and from police departments across 4 states. All of it in a fireproof box in his spare bedroom in El Paso. Danny gave up everything trying to find you, Earl said. I mean everything. Sold his truck twice. Took out loans twice. Worked weekends for years just to pay detective fees. I begged him to let it go. He'd just look at me and say, Earl, I am not going to let my daughter grow up thinking her daddy walked away from her. Then Earl said something that made me pull over to the side of the road. I also have a letter, Grace. A letter Sandra wrote to Danny in 1993. She didn't mail it to him herself. Carol brought it to him about a year after she first passed along the story about the fire. Carol said she couldn't carry the guilt anymore. I gripped the steering wheel. In that letter, Sandra admits you were alive. In her own handwriting. She says she took you because she wanted a fresh start and she didn't want the hassle of sharing custody. She says she told everyone you died because it was, Earl paused, cleaner that way. That word landed in my car like something dropped from a great height. I had an official stamped copy made back in 2004 when Danny thought about taking it to court. The legal time limit made the whole case too complicated and he couldn't pay for the fight. But I still have every copy. I sat on the side of that road and stared at a Panda Express sign for a long time without really seeing it. Here is where I stood. A dying father I had never really known. A stepmother who had looked me in the face for 34 years without ever once flinching. A letter in her own handwriting saying exactly what she had done. And a question that was getting louder by the second, what do I do with all of this? Now here's the part that nobody expected. Not me. Not Earl. Not Daniel. Stay with me because what I'm about to tell you is the detail that made the whole thing finally click into place, and I still feel it in my chest when I think about it. When I went back to Daniel on Thursday morning and went through the envelope again more carefully, there was a photograph buried at the very bottom that I'd completely missed the first time. It was a photo of a girl, maybe 12 or 13, standing outside a middle school with a backpack on, earbuds in, laughing at something. In the background, barely readable, a sign, Mesquite Middle School, Tucson. I knew her the second I saw her. 'Cause I had been her. I turned it over. On the back, in the same careful handwriting as the birthday letters. Found through detective November 2002. She's alive. She looks like her grandmother. He had found me when I was 13 years old. He had actually come to Tucson. He had stood outside my school. I looked up at Daniel. You found me in 2002. Why didn't you come for me? He was quiet for a moment. His jaw moved. I drove to Tucson, he said slowly. I sat outside that school for 2 days. I watched you come out with your backpack and your music and your friends. You were laughing. A tear slid down his face. You looked happy, Grace. You looked like a kid who had a real life. And I sat there and thought, if I walk up to that girl right now and blow all of this apart, who does that really help? It helps me. Gives me what I want. But what does it do to her? He exhaled slowly. I drove home. I told myself I'd come back when you were grown, when you could choose for yourself. But you didn't come back. I hired someone to find you again in 2010. By then you'd moved twice. Trail went cold. But I never stopped trying. Every few years I'd start again. I held that photograph of my 13-year-old self for a very long time. He had been maybe 20 feet away from me. And he had turned around and driven 400 miles back to El Paso so he wouldn't mess up my life. If you've ever had someone fight for you in a way you never even knew about, type "fought for me" in the comments right now. 'Cause that is exactly what this man had been doing for 34 years. I drove to Sandra's house that Saturday afternoon. She lives in a nice ranch-style house in the foothills neighborhood of Tucson, the one she kept after her divorce from Raymond Pettis 8 years ago. Clean yard. A little ceramic fountain out front that runs year-round. A welcome mat that says "grateful and blessed." I used to think that mat was sweet. Her neighbor and closest friend, Diane Marsh, was already there when I showed up, which I hadn't counted on. Diane was the kind of woman who put herself at the center of every room and made it her job to steer whatever was happening in it. She looked at me sideways from the second I walked in. Sandra had made chicken and rice. Normal Saturday lunch. She moved around the kitchen like nothing in the world was any different. I waited until Diane stepped outside to take a phone call. Mom. What was my biological father's full name? Sandra's wooden spoon stopped in the pot. Just for a beat. Then she kept stirring. Daniel something. I don't really remember. Why are you bringing this up? Daniel Roy Harmon. Born 1968 in El Paso. Long-haul truck driver. Kitchen clock ticked. The little fountain outside burbled. She turned around slowly. Where is this coming from? Did someone reach out to you? Right there. I caught it right away. She didn't say, "How on earth do you know that?" She said, "Did someone reach out to you?" The words of someone who has always known the secret is out there, not someone hearing a name for the first time. I didn't say anyone reached out to me, Mom. I said his name. Grace. She set the spoon down. Nice and careful. That man was dangerous. Kept you safe from him. I'm not doing this right now. Diane came back in through the back door, reading the room with those sharp eyes of hers. Everything okay in here? Totally fine, Sandra said right away. Grace is just going through something. I followed Sandra into the hallway, out of Diane's earshot. He's one of my patients, I said quietly. He's in a long-term care facility across town. He's dying. She went completely still. He has papers. A birth certificate. Letters he wrote me for 34 years. Private detective receipts. All of it. She turned around slowly, and I watched something shift behind her eyes, like a switch flipping, a plan forming. Her lips started to tremble. Her hand went to her chest. How can you do this to me? After everything I gave up for you? I raised you on my own. I worked doubles. I gave you everything. He has a letter you wrote, I said, keeping my voice even. In your own handwriting. Telling him I was alive and you were hiding me from him. Color drained out of her face all at once like someone had pulled a plug. She stepped back. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. She followed me outside onto the driveway, away from Diane. The motion light clicked on. Just the two of us. Her voice dropped into something I had never heard from her before. Cold. Flat. Sharp like a knife. "He is dying," she said. "In a few weeks, this whole thing goes away on its own. All of it. You want me to stay quiet until he dies so the truth dies with him. I want you to think very hard about what you're throwing away." "I'm not throwing anything away. You did that 34 years ago." Her eyes went hard. "If you push this any further, I will call your boss at EMS. I have people at the county health board, Grace. I will make sure the right people hear that you got personally involved with one of your patients and that your judgment can't be trusted. I know exactly who to call." The air went tight in my chest. "Are you threatening my career?" "I am protecting this family. Like I've always protected this family." I looked at her for a long, quiet moment. For the first time in my adult life, I looked at Sandra without feeling like I owed her everything. Without all that weight of thank you and gratitude, and she gave up so much for me. I saw a woman backed into a corner, running through options, completely willing to burn down her own daughter's job to keep a secret she'd been sitting on for 30 years. I got in my car. "You didn't protect me," I said through the window. "You locked me inside a story you made up." In the mirror, she stood alone under the porch light, arms at her sides. She didn't go back inside. Not for a long time. Monday morning, I got called into my supervisor's office before I'd even put my bag down. "Grace, have a seat." Captain Teresa Ruiz had run our station for over a decade. She was the kind of person you wanted next to you when things got bad. Steady, fair, sharp. Right now, her face wasn't giving anything away. I got a call Friday evening. A woman who said she was your mother. She told me you'd gotten personally involved with one of your patients and that she was asking for an investigation. I set my coffee on her desk carefully because my hand wanted to shake and I was not going to let it. "That patient," I said, "is my biological father. I found out 5 days ago." Teresa leaned back in her chair. She had seen a lot in that office over the years. I could tell this one was new ground even for her. "You know the rules, Grace. If there's a family connection, I have to pull you from his direct care while we look into it." "I know. I'll step back from his medical care completely. But I want to visit him on my own time as family." "That's your right. I can't stop that." She paused, then added something almost like it was nothing, the way people do when they want you to hear something but don't want to be the one who said it. "Your stepmother, Sandra Pettis, she's being honored this coming Saturday at the Saguaro Hills Community Center. Tucson Women in Service Award. Big ceremony. She made a point of inviting people from local emergency services." I didn't say anything. "Slideshow, speeches, the whole deal," Teresa said and looked back down at her paperwork. She wasn't telling me what to do. She was just telling me. Sandra had actually picked up the phone and called my job. She had tried to cut me off from my dying father before he could tell me anything else. I called Chelsea from the parking lot. "She's trying to keep you away from him before he dies," Chelsea said before I'd even finished. "So whatever truth he's still got left goes straight into the ground with him." That's exactly what I figured. "So what are you going to do about Saturday?" I didn't answer right away. A FedEx package from El Paso showed up at my apartment Wednesday evening. Earl had sent it overnight. I sat down on my kitchen floor to open it. I always end up on the floor when something is too big to handle standing up. There's something about needing to feel something solid and real underneath me. 3 things inside. The first was a letter, handwritten on spiral notebook paper, the kind with the little torn bits on the left edge. Earl's note said it was from early 1993, brought to Daniel by Sandra's cousin Carol about a year after she first passed along the fire story. Carol had told Earl she couldn't keep carrying it anymore. I read it. "Danny, I'm leaving and I'm taking Grace. Don't come looking for us." I told people she died. It's cleaner this way. I need a fresh start. She will be better off not knowing you. Don't make this any harder than it needs to be. I read it again. Slowly. Then I held it next to the birthday card Sandra had mailed me 2 months earlier. Happy 36, sweetheart! So proud of everything you've become. Love always, Mom. The looping capital G. The way she shaped her lowercase a. The high cross on the T. The way she underlined the word love. Identical. Right down to how hard she pressed the pen. The second thing was a detective's report from 2002, the same year as the photo of my 13-year-old self outside Mesquite Middle School. The detective had tracked down a Sandra Pettis in Tucson's foothills area, married to Raymond Pettis' stepdaughter named Grace, going to Mesquite Middle School. By the time Daniel had saved up enough to send someone out in person, Sandra had already moved me to a different school across town. One step ahead. Always. The third thing was a photograph. Daniel young, maybe 22 or 23, grinning so wide his eyes were almost shut, holding a tiny baby in a white onesie. On the back in pencil, Danny and Gracie, 2 months old. I sat on that kitchen floor and read her letter over and over until the words blurred. It's cleaner this way. She stole 34 years from my father. From me. From a whole family I hadn't even known existed yet. 'Cause it was cleaner. I need to stop here and tell you about Eleanor. 'Cause Eleanor is one of the most important people in this whole story, and I didn't even know she existed until Earl brought her up almost by accident during our second phone call. Eleanor Harmon. Daniel's mother. My grandmother. 76 years old, still living in the same house in El Paso where Daniel grew up. I called her on Thursday evening, sitting in my car in the parking garage at work. She answered on the third ring. A careful, quiet voice, the voice of someone who has spent many years learning to be careful about phone calls she doesn't recognize. Mrs. Harmon, my name is Grace. Grace Harmon. Earl Goodwin gave me your number. Silence. 6 seconds. 7. 8. 9. And then she made a sound I will carry for the rest of my life. Small and broken and completely out of her control, like something that had been holding on tight for a very long time finally letting go. Grace. Her voice was barely above a breath. Oh, my Grace. She knew exactly who I was. She told me she had kept my room. 34 years. Ladybug wallpaper faded from bright red to dusty pink. A hand-carved rocking horse Daniel had built in her garage in the weeks before I was born, still sitting right where he'd put it. Danny never stopped, she told me, her voice breaking every few sentences. He went to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children every single year and updated your file. He had artists draw what they thought you might look like at 5 years old, at 10, at 15, at 20. A librarian helped him put them online. He printed them all and taped them to the wall above his bed. I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. Every Christmas he bought you a present. Wrapped it, wrote your name on the tag, and put it on the shelf in your room. I have 34 of them, Grace. One for every Christmas he didn't know where you were. I couldn't make a sound. He never got through a single Christmas without crying, Eleanor said quietly. He told me the holidays didn't feel real anymore. He went through the motions for my sake. But I always knew. Every December, he'd go sit in that room and just look at those gifts on the shelf. Then she told me the part that hit the hardest. Sandra called me once. Summer of 1999. I picked up and she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Stop letting Danny look for her. She's gone." And I said, "Is she really dead?" And Sandra said, Eleanor's voice broke all the way. She said, "She is to you." I had to hold the steering wheel with both hands just to stay steady. Eleanor had been carrying those 5 words for 25 years. Sandra had called this woman, a grandmother who had kept a child's room waiting for 34 years, and told her, "She is to you." That Friday evening I went to see Daniel. Not as his paramedic. As his daughter. He was weaker than he'd been earlier that week. But when I came through the door, something happened to his face that I don't have the right words for. It was like watching a room light up from the inside when someone finally comes home. He patted the edge of the mattress. I sat. We talked. Not about Sandra. Not about papers and timelines and all the years that got taken. We talked the way two people talk when they're trying to squeeze a whole lifetime into whatever hours they've actually got left. He told me he had carved a rocking horse from an oak plank he'd found at a lumber salvage yard, working on it 2 weeks' worth of nights after long shifts. He said Sandra had told him he was wasting his time building something I'd outgrow before I could even walk. The rocking horse was still in Eleanor's house. She hadn't touched it once. He asked me the question I had been dreading. Did she, Sandra, did she at least treat you okay? Growing up, I thought about it carefully and honestly. She fed me, I said, kept me in school, pushed me to be something. But she also controlled every memory I had of you. She built a wall around my past and dressed it up so it looked like she was keeping me safe. I met his eyes. She gave me a roof and a lie. Not the truth. He nodded slowly, looking at the ceiling. I don't want you to hate her, Grace. His voice was quiet. What she did was deeply wrong. But hate is heavy. And you've already been carrying more than your share for a long time. Then he told me the thing that turned me cold all over. In 2012, she contacted me. I stared at him. Sandra. Out of nowhere. She had heard through some old connection that my mother owned property in El Paso that had gone up in value. She called wanting to talk about some kind of deal. He paused. I hung up. But Grace, she knew I was alive. She knew I had never stopped looking for you. And she went home to you and kept right on telling you I was a dangerous man who had run off and disappeared. She had known he was alive for at least 13 years before I ever found him. And she had looked me in the face without one single crack. I need to stop right here because I know some of you are sitting there with your jaws on the floor right now. A woman who told her stepdaughter her father was dead actually called that father in 2012 trying to squeeze money from his mother's property, and then went right back home and kept the whole lie going. If you have ever found out that someone you trusted was hiding something huge from you for years, type betrayed in the comments. 'Cause what comes next, what I did the following Saturday, is something I still think about. And I need to know if you would have done the same thing. The Tucson Women in Service ceremony was that next Saturday afternoon. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror in a dark blazer I hadn't worn since a coworker's going-away dinner. Hair down. Barely any makeup. I looked steady. Inside I was a Category 5 storm. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter. I picked it up. Held it. Put it back down. Picked it up again. Slid it into my bag. I didn't decide to use it. I just could not leave it sitting there. I called Chelsea from the parking lot of the Saguaro Hills Community Center. I genuinely have no idea what I'm about to do in there, I said. Yes, you do, she said. You always know. That's why you're good at your job. Trust yourself. I sat in the car for 3 full minutes. Both hands on the wheel. Engine off. Then I got out. The main hall was set up for about 150 people. Round tables, folding chairs, white tablecloths, a podium with a mic, a big screen running a slideshow on a loop. Sandra at the food pantry. Sandra mentoring young mothers. Sandra holding an award. Sandra, Sandra, Sandra. A banner across the front of the room, honoring Sandra Pettis, 25 years of faithful service to the Tucson community. Faithful service. I spotted Diane right away. Front row already in position. There were city council members I recognized. People from the county health board. A local news camera in the back corner, which I had not expected and which made every decision I was about to face feel much heavier. And there was Sandra. Right in the middle of the room. Navy blazer, well-practiced wide smile, shaking hands, taking hugs. Completely in her element. She spotted me and her smile got even bigger. She tilted her head, that warm, proud mom tilt she had spent 30 years perfecting. She thought I was there to be her big finish. I found a seat in the fourth row. A local councilman named Doug Farrell walked to the podium and started talking about Sandra's decades of service to Tucson. The slideshow started rolling through photos. Baby pictures of me. Sandra and me at a park. My first day of kindergarten. My EMT graduation. Then Sandra stepped to the mic, and the room settled into that special quiet that belongs to courtrooms and churches and moments right before something big happens. 25 years ago, she began, her voice warm and perfectly timed, I was a single mother with nothing but a 2-year-old girl and a prayer. She paused. Let the room soak it in. Grace's father left before she could form a single memory of him. He chose his own freedom over his daughter. And I made a choice that day. I was going to be enough for her. I was going to be everything. A woman in the third row was already wiping her eyes. Diane nodded hard. The slideshow stopped on my EMT graduation photo, me in my uniform, Sandra's arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling for the camera. My daughter became an emergency medical technician, Sandra said, and her voice cracked right on cue. She saves lives every single day. And I believe with everything in me that she became that person because she grew up knowing what it meant to be saved. She turned and looked right at me. And in that moment I understood exactly what was happening. She was using me. Using my job, my identity, the pain I had turned into something meaningful. And she was doing it out loud in front of 150 people and a news camera like it all belonged to her. She was telling the story of my life. The version she had invented. And she was smiling at me while she did it. I stood up. The room shifted the way rooms do when someone does something unexpected in a quiet moment. Sandra's smile didn't break. Not yet. She thought I was standing up to go hug her. To be her big grand finale. She opened one arm slightly, ready to pull me in. I walked to the stage. My boots on the hardwood floor. 3 steps up to the podium. I adjusted the mic, looked out at 150 faces. Thank you, Councilman Farrell, I said. And thank you all for being here. I looked at Sandra. She was 4 feet to my left. Still smiling. Hands clasped. Waiting. Mom, you have told this story for 34 years. The story of the father who walked away from his daughter. You told it to me. You told it to every single person in this room. And tonight I am going to tell you the truth. The smile finally cracked. The room went completely still, not just quiet still. The kind of still that has real weight to it. I'm not here to embarrass my stepmother. I'm here because there is a man dying in a care facility 15 minutes from this building. A man who spent 34 years and every dollar he ever made trying to find me. A man who deserves to have the truth said out loud at least once before he dies. The room sat with that for a moment. My father did not abandon me. Those 6 words landed differently than everything else I'd said. His name is Daniel Roy Harmon. He is a retired truck driver from El Paso, Texas. He has never been violent. He has never been a drifter. He is dying of liver disease 15 minutes from where you're sitting right now. And he has been looking for me since 1991. Multiple gasps. All at once. Diane's hand flew to her mouth. In 1991, when I was 2 years old, my stepmother took me across state lines. She told my father I had died in a house fire. She told me he was a dangerous man who had walked away. She did this so she could start her life over without the hassle of shared custody. Sandra moved toward the podium. Grace. I didn't raise my voice. My father hired private detectives. He filed missing persons reports. He drove to Tucson in 2002 and sat outside my middle school for 2 days just to see that I was still alive. He bought me a Christmas present for every single year he didn't know where I was. 34 presents. Still wrapped. still sitting on a shelf in his mother's house in El Paso. She's confused. Sandra grabbed the edge of the podium, knuckles white, voice going high and tight. He is a sick, dishonest man who is putting ideas in her head. I opened my bag, pulled out the envelope, took out the letter. In her own handwriting, I said clearly into the mic, addressed to my father in 1993. I looked at Sandra one more time. She gave a tiny shake of her head. Her eyes went wide. I read it out loud. Danny, I'm leaving and I'm taking Grace. Don't come looking for us. I told people she died. It's cleaner this way. I need a fresh start. She'll be better off not knowing you. A woman in the third row made a sharp, uncontrollable sound that cut through the room like a knife. I looked at Sandra. That is your handwriting. I have been reading it on birthday cards my whole life. The room was dead silent. Diane stood up from the front row. She picked up her purse and walked toward the exit without a word, without looking at anyone. She didn't slam the door. She just left, quietly and with her mind made up, the way people leave when they know they're not coming back. 3 more people stood up. Then a couple near the side. Councilman took a step back from the podium. Sandra stood in the spotlight she had built for herself, under the banner with her name on it, in front of the slideshow she had put together herself, and the audience was not clapping. I did what I had to do, she said. To no one. To everyone. Her voice sounded thin and far away. You don't understand what it was like. I folded the letter back into the envelope. I spent 34 years grieving a father who was grieving me, I said quietly into the mic. That ends today. I stepped back from the podium. I'm going to see my father now. If you have anything honest to say to me, not excuses, not threats, the truth, you know where I am. I walked down the steps. Each step felt lighter than the one before. I moved up the center aisle. 150 faces. Some with tears. Some with something harder to put a name to. An older woman I had never seen before caught my arm as I passed. God bless you, honey, she whispered. You go tell that man he is loved. I pushed through the back doors. November air. Cool and clean and sharp. I stood in the parking lot for just a moment, eyes closed. I am not your story. I am not your prop. I am Daniel Harmon's daughter, and he is going to hear that from me before he dies. I got in my car and I drove. You are still with me, and I really hope you are, because the last part of this story is the part that stayed with me the most. Please share this video right now with one person you love. Just one person. 'Cause there are people in your life who need to hear this. And it costs you nothing but a second. I walked into his room at 7:20 that evening. The November sky was going deep orange and red through the window. Daniel was awake. When I came through the door, his face did something I will be looking for in every face I see for the rest of my life. It was the look of someone who has held their breath for 34 years and can finally let it go. I sat down, took his hand. Dad. I had never said that word to anyone. Tasted strange and completely right in the exact same moment. I told him what had happened at the ceremony. He listened with his eyes closed, tears running slow and quiet down his face. When I finished, his hand tightened around mine. I pulled out my phone and called Eleanor in El Paso. She answered standing in her kitchen. I could see the yellow curtains behind her. When the video connected and she saw Daniel and me in the same frame together, she pressed both hands over her mouth and made a sound that wasn't a word, just 34 years of grief and relief spilling out all at once. Danny, she said through her fingers. She's really there. I know, Mama. His voice was barely a thread. I can see her. I held the phone so they could see each other. Daniel's hand came up and touched the screen, touched his mother's face through the glass. 3 people in 2 cities connected by a phone screen and 34 years of loss. Later, I read him his own letters. Every single one. He lay there with his eyes closed and a small tired smile while I read the words he had written for a daughter he was told would never get to hear them. "I'm here, Dad," I said when I finished. "I'm right here. And I am not leaving." 2.5 weeks later, Daniel had a rally. Every paramedic and care worker knows what a rally is. Right near the very end, some patients get a sudden burst of energy and clear-headedness, the body pulling together everything it has left for one last good moment. Families sometimes think it means things are turning around. We know what it really means. He was sitting up on his own when I walked in. Some color back in his face. Eyes clear. Eleanor had driven up from El Paso and was sitting in the corner chair, coat still on, watching her son the way only mothers know how to watch their children. Daniel reached under his pillow and pulled out a small wood carving, a bird, smooth and worn, small enough to fit in my palm. Every feather line carefully carved in. "I made this the day you were born," he said. "I was in the hospital waiting room. I always had a piece of wood in my pocket, old habit. I didn't know what else to do with my hands while I waited." He turned it over and showed me the bottom. Scratched into the wood, for Grace. June 3rd, 1989. "I want you to have it." I held that little bird. It was still warm from his hands. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything. Don't carry the anger forever. What Sandra did was wrong. But anger is a heavy thing to carry, and you've already been hauling too much for too long. I'll try. And take care of Mama. She's stubborn as a fence post, but she loves you like you never left." "I heard every word of that, Daniel," Eleanor said from her corner chair. We all laughed. All three of us together. First time. Last time. "I got to hold my daughter's hand," Daniel said after the laughter settled. "That's all I ever needed." 4 days later. My phone lit up in the dark at 4:19 a.m. The overnight nurse. I didn't ask any questions. I pulled on clothes and drove through Tucson at 4 a.m., every single traffic light turning green as I came to it, like the city itself was clearing the way. The facility was in its deep quiet, that held-breath stillness that belongs to the hours right before dawn. I walked into room 7. Daniel's breathing had changed. Long, slow. The gaps between breaths getting wider and wider. 15 seconds. 20. 25. I sat down and took his hand. His fingers were cool. "It's okay, Dad," I said. "I'm right here. You found me. You can go." His eyelids moved, not opening, just a tiny flutter like someone half waking from a dream. His hand tightened around mine. Once. Soft but real. 4:51 a.m. Daniel Roy Harmon exhaled. And the exhale just got softer and softer until it became silence. I sat with him. I don't know how long. Then I picked up my phone and called Eleanor. "Is he?" Her voice was already broken. "He's gone, Grandma." He was peaceful. And he was not alone. One hard sob. Then, thank God. After all this time, thank God he was not alone. I had 22 days with my father. It should have been a lifetime. But 22 days was enough to know I was always loved, never forgotten, and never, not for one single day, abandoned. We buried Daniel Roy Harmon in El Paso on a Tuesday. A small church in the neighborhood where he grew up. White painted brick. Wooden pews worn soft by decades of use. A stained glass window that threw gold and red light across the floor when the afternoon sun came through it. Earl Goodwin had put it all together. About 70 people came, old neighbors, people whose loads Daniel had hauled for years, men from the lumber yard, his barber of 20 years. Earl spoke first. He talked about Daniel as a man with steady hands and stubborn love. The kind of neighbor who showed up after a storm without being asked. The kind of friend who picked up the phone at midnight without a sigh. Then he talked about me. "Danny spent 34 years looking for his daughter," Earl said. "Most of us told him to move on. He never listened to a word of it. 3 weeks before he died, Grace walked into his room. That is not luck. That is a father's love that flat out refused to quit. I stood when Earl sat down. I had 22 days with my father, I said. But in those 22 days, he showed me more about what love really looks like than I learned in 34 years of living inside a story that was never real. Through the service, they came to me one by one. They told me Daniel had talked about me every Christmas, that he had shown them a baby photo at every single gathering for 30 years, that they had worried about him for a long time. We thought he was holding on to something that wasn't there, one of his old neighbors said to me. I'm so glad we were wrong. Earl handed me a cardboard box. Inside, the full file, the original letter in a sleeve to protect it, a small cassette tape, and a stack of photos held together with a rubber band. That night in Eleanor's kitchen, she and I played the cassette tape on an old player she dug out of the hall closet. A baby's laugh. Bright and clear. Then, without any question, da-da-da, duh. Eleanor and I listened to it 4 times. We didn't say much. We didn't need to. 6 weeks after the ceremony, I met Sandra at a coffee shop on Speedway Boulevard. Neutral ground. She looked different. Thinner. Hair down and plain, the first time I could remember seeing her in public without it done up. No audience. No stage. Just her. She sat across from me with a cup she never touched. Grace, I know what I did was... Mom. I put my hands flat on the table. I'm not here to punish you. And I'm not here to forgive you. Not right now. Maybe not ever. I honestly don't know yet. She flinched. Here's what I know. You stole 34 years from me and from my father. He died without getting those years back. That is permanent. Nothing changes it. Coffee shop hummed around us. The espresso machine hissed. What I can control is what happens from here. And here's what happens. I am Daniel Harmon's daughter. That is part of who I am now, and you do not get to take it from me. I will visit Eleanor. I will go to El Paso. I will carry his name. That is not up for discussion. She stared at the table. If you want any kind of relationship with me going forward, it starts with honesty. Not reasons and justifications. Not the story about what you had to do. The truth. All of it. Every piece you've buried. What if I can't do that? She whispered. Then we don't have a relationship. And that will be your choice, not mine. I put money on the table for both coffees. I loved the stepmother you pretended to be, I said. I'm still trying to figure out who you actually are underneath that. Until you can show me that real person, I need space. The bell above the door rang as I walked out. 7 months later. I live in El Paso now. I moved to the EMS team at a regional medical center here. Same work, same hours, different sky, wider and bluer than I expected. I moved into Eleanor's house. She needed someone around. I needed a family that didn't come with conditions attached. Daniel's workshop still stands behind the house, a garage he had turned into a workspace with a concrete floor, pegboard walls covered in hand tools, and sawdust settled into every corner. I go in there on my days off. Earl comes by on weekends and has been teaching me how to use the tools. My first try at making anything close to a straight shelf looked like it had been built by someone who had a personal problem with right angles. Daniel would have laughed hard at it. On the workbench, the little carved bird. A photo of him holding me at 2 months old, both of us grinning like crazy. A stack of 34 letters held together with a rubber band, everyone starting the same way, Dear Grace. I've read them all. Some of them more than once. Some of them so many times the folds are going soft. Eleanor calls from the kitchen every morning. Grace. Breakfast. Coming, Grandma. I take one more look around the workshop before I go. Sawdust in the corners. The smell of walnut oil and old wood. A half-finished birdhouse on the back shelf that Daniel never got to complete. His hands were all over this room. His patience. His stubbornness. His love in its most hard-headed and most lasting form. I lost 34 years. But I gained the one thing my stepmother could never make up and never take away from me, the truth. And a family that never once stopped looking. My name is Grace Harmon. I am an EMT. I am Daniel Harmon's daughter. And I was never ever abandoned. So that is my story. The version that was never supposed to be told. Before you go, I have to ask you something real. If you found out tomorrow that everything you had believed about your own past was built on a lie, would you want to know the truth? Even if it broke everything wide open? Even if it cost you everything? Type truth or lie in the comments. I read every single one and I want to know what you think. And if this story hit you somewhere you weren't expecting, share it right now with one person. Just one. 'Cause there are fathers out there at this very moment who are still looking. And there are people walking around carrying pain that was never theirs to carry in the first place. Hit that subscribe button if you want to be here for the next one. Every story I tell is one that deserved to be heard out loud. I'll see you in the next one.